My name is Stephen Mindel. Right, I'll be your chairman for this evening. Thank you all for coming. Because it's quite a small audience, we'll try and do it a little bit more intimate as a conversation, as opposed to lecturing and doing it that way. So please feel free when we come to questions, we'll welcome your input. So first of all, what we'll do is I will tell you, the reason we're here is because Richmond Council have believed that this is the time to do these community events, working with our community so that you have an opportunity for input into what's happening in all aspects of the council's work. Richmond community is committed to working with you to have a borough that is fairer, safer and greener. A borough that is for everyone, where everyone has the opportunity to have their say on prominent local and borough-wide issues. I'd like to introduce the panel. So starting on my far right, we have your councillor Afra Brandreth, then Rita Palmer, and finally Councillor Paul Hodgins. Okay, the far exits are there at the back where we came in and at the side. I'm an independent chair and I'm here to help field your questions and to ensure that the event keeps on time. So, I hope you've all had a chance to see the exhibition as you came in, and it's been designed to help feedback on your priorities for your ward. And if not, stay at the end and put any ideas on the big maps. Ward councillors and council engagement officers are here to help. We're going to review the local ward achievements. Then about 7:20, hopefully we'll be on time, we'll do pre-submitted questions. Then I will open the floor for questions. And then you have another opportunity to look at the exhibition, and we hope to finish about 9 o'clock. I think that's it for the moment. So we'll start with the review of the ward achievements, and I'll start with Rita, if you'd like to tell people what your achievements are.
Can you hear me? Good evening, everyone. Well, I'm going to tell you about one that I class as an achievement, because it was quite different and horrendous. I was called out, probably last October, by several residents complaining about a vermin infestation in Church Road, a rat infestation. And if there's one thing I've got a phobia about, it's mice and rats, but I had to look at the pictures, and I was told, and it was verified, some of these rats were the size of cats. Now, the people, we had to talk to people living in flats above the shops, the restaurants, but it came down to the negligence of traders in Church Road on both sides, but mainly on the Mortlake and Barnes common side of the White Line. At the back, they have spaces to have their commercial waste bins, which is good, they're paying for that service, but where they were negligent was they were leaving the bins open or stuffing in too much rubbish so that the bin lid stayed open, and other people passing by would put rubbish in. But of course, as I've learned the hard way, any material, paper, cardboard, rags, anything left outside of a building at night, this is nesting ground for rats. So it took a few months. I talked to all the traders, issued notices from the street scene enforcement officer, and I'm pleased to say, fingers crossed, we got on top of the problem. But I am very aware, I'm very cautious when I see rubbish fly tipped, because it could happen again anywhere. And that was what I classed as an achievement. But what I want to do next is to tackle the fly tipping, especially on the Castelnau estate, it's becoming quite severe. But Stephen, our chairman, wanted me to talk about achievements, and I feel that was something we achieved. We put that to rest, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Rita. Afra?
So we've been very busy and lots of things have been happening. I can talk about a few of the achievements, but then we'll get on to the big thing that I'm sure everybody really wants to know about. I mean, I'm pleased to say that we've had more trees planted. I've been dealing with lots of issues from people on Madrid Road and Elm Grove Road. We've had concerns and we've managed to sort that out really swiftly. We're continuing to work with the town centre manager and the BCA, progressing ideas for the future of Barnes High Street. Very pleased that we had the opening of the Suffolk Road Recreation Ground, which has been a really big success already, always full of children from all different areas of Barnes, so that's been really fantastic. But of course, all of those achievements are at the moment slightly overshadowed by the challenges that people locally are facing with the closure of Hammersmith Bridge and the impact on the buses. I know that we're almost certainly going to get on to talk about that later, and people will have specific questions. So I think all three of us on the panel are happy to try to answer those as best we can.
Thank you very much. And Paul?
Yeah, great. Well, I think it was achievements and issues. You want to talk about it as Afra talking about it. The big issue is, in fact, the exact opposite of an achievement, which is the bridge and the closure of the bridge that is impacting everybody in Barnes. I know there are some different views on the bridge and what needs to happen going forward. But for anybody who wasn't at the recent meetings where TfL was at, it's worth just recapping that what is happening at the moment is that TfL, Transport for London, has the bridge is owned and managed by Hammersmith and Fulham Council. And Transport for London has taken over the project management of the programme going forward for the bridge. They are looking at the different options at the moment, and they have said that they will come back by September, end of August, September, with their options for the bridge and their recommended option. So at that point, we should have an idea of what is actually going to happen with the bridge, the time frame, the proposed fix from TfL, and also the costs. There's a little bit of wrangling to do with the costs between Hammersmith and Fulham Council, with Transport for London and the government. TfL, Transport for London, has £1.5 billion of reserves for, certainly in part for transport emergencies, and I would certainly categorise this as a transport emergency in West London that needs to get fixed. Zach Goldsmith at his meeting pledged to be lobbying the government and whoever comes in as Secretary of State next for transport to be providing some funding in order to help it. So I think the funding with a little bit of wrangling is not the issue, and it will get there. The issue is what is the plan, how long it's going to be closed for. Transport for London said that they believe it will be closed for up to 3 years, which probably gives you the shortest time frame for when it's going to be closed. But that is the timing that we're looking at. And then after, I don't know if you want to just add about the buses, which I know that we will talk about later, but we're aware of the issues around buses.
Yes, I think as everybody I'm sure in this room is aware, following the closure of Hammersmith Bridge, a number of the bus routes have been changed through Barnes to try to accommodate the closure of the bridge. And obviously that has caused issues for a number of people. There's, particularly the impact of the change of the 209 now going to Putney Bridge Station, and also the reduced frequency of buses that are now serving around this area near the Castelnau Community Centre and along Lonsdale Road for some of the schools along Lonsdale Road, amongst other issues. The buses were talked about at the recent public meetings that have been held both by the council and by our local MP, and all three of us councillors have been speaking with TfL and really putting the pressure on them alongside our Member of Parliament and other council members to try to get TfL to instigate the necessary changes. TfL have said at the moment that in June they were doing a survey of the bus usage. This was just a survey looking at where people were getting on and off and how many people. It wasn't actually speaking to people, but they at the same time are doing a consultation, which we can provide the details on if you want to feedback. And that they will look at all of those results and make the necessary changes. They've said that they will definitely do that by the start of September, but we're going to put the pressure on to try and get them to do it sooner, because obviously they were able to make these changes to how they are currently very quickly, and it's not really clear why it seems to be taking them so long to change it back. But happy to take specific questions on that through the course of this evening.
And then finally, Stephen, if I could just add, it's just, in case there are questions, just worth people being aware of a few things that are happening in terms of planning applications and some of the bids that have gone in for some of the projects, potential projects that are coming on board. So, of course, St. Paul's continues its upgrade, and it has a planning application in at the moment for the next stage. The Barnes Hospital site, other end of Barnes, that has gone through in its planning application, and there's an application there for I believe just over 80 homes, some continued medical and mental health trust facilities there, and also a new special school, which in fact is greatly needed within the borough. It's in quite a difficult site, and the traffic in and out of it is not easy. So there were some different feelings about that. Of course, we've got the brewery coming up, and that was meant to have come by now, but I think there are negotiations happening, and of course it impacts this area through some of the pressures on the local area and transport. But one important thing I want to say, particularly for Lowther School, is the provision of a new secondary school coming on board for it, which is very important for this area of Barnes in how far away it is from now Richmond Park Academy. Where Richmond Park Academy has been filling up and was full this year in Year 7. And parents were finding at Lowther School, right at the start of applications, that they weren't getting in to begin with. And we've got this bulge of children that are coming up. There's a need for more secondary places. And as the support for Richmond Park Academy in the community continues to grow, there will be more children going there, and therefore we need some more places. So it is an important part of the application for all of Barnes, and we'll talk about some of the transport issues later. And then finally, just so you know that there are some potential projects that are seeking funding at the moment. Vine Road Recreation Ground has an application in for funding at the moment for some additional facilities, which I think is quite exciting. Things like a splash pad and a pump track, and some other good facilities for young people within Vine Road Park. The OSO has application in for some council funding for better access for all residents to the OSO. And the BCA has an application in. There's a plan for high street improvements and some traffic improvements, and that is stalled a little bit. There was a whole feasibility study that was done, but everyone's continuing to try to push ahead with that.
Thank you very much, Paul. So, I would now like to open the floor for the pre-submitted questions. Andrew Duncan, are you here? Yeah. Thank you. Andrew, would you like to read your question for the panel?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. My question is about the area we're in at the moment, North Barnes Estate, Castelnau Estate, and I've got a particular interest in London and the character of its different neighbourhoods, and I live here as well. And my question is, does anyone feel like me that the character of our garden suburb estate is gradually being eroded by unsympathetic developments, and in particular by the removal of hedges, a key feature of a garden suburb estate? If you want, I can just give you a little bit of context. There are quite a few. I think this area has been discovered because of its proximity to the tube, etc. And there are quite a few developments going on, and a lot of houses are being changed from their cottage character to larger houses, which is fine. People need more space, but at the same time, you often get paving over of front gardens, and the removal of trees, and the removal of hedges. And in the first place, that's sort of the opposite of what the character of this little area is. And secondly, it's obviously not what we should be doing in terms of the environment generally. So I was really wondering if anyone's sympathetic with me to what's happening here, and whether the council or councillors can do anything about it. There's a very important junction where Barnes Avenue meets Boileau Road. There's a wonderful hedge and a huge willow tree on the south side, and on the north side the house has just been extended, and a wonderful hedge, 40 metres of hedge, disappeared virtually overnight. So it's really opened up that particular junction, but that's just one example. So anyway, I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
Right, which one of my colleagues would like to take that?
Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
If anyone. So to the essential question is yes, absolutely. I think we all sympathise with that, and in fact, the biggest challenge we've got right across London over the next 10 years or so is the pressure on housing and the development and the pressure from all sides, locally, but in particular from the mayor and also from the government. So it's a cross-party pressure that we've got for more housing, and almost just trying to chase numbers rather than considering how are we preserving our communities to make sure the character, the physical character of the communities, to make sure that while we do have growth, as you say, and it is necessary, that we are retaining places that everyone wants to live, including the green aspects of the borough. So I think the council and we as councillors locally need to do as much as we can to help encourage that. Unfortunately, in hedges, and I believe the hedge that you're talking about, I don't think the council has any powers over preventing that hedge from going, is what I was advised by planning officers. As Afra said, the council is planting more trees, and we could be there advocating for that, and to be talking to any developers to say, that those hedges were greatly appreciated by people around, and if they retain that character, I would think that it increases and manages to retain the value that they've got. So we can be advocates as well as using whatever powers that we've got. But of course, everything needs to go through planning, and within our sort of local plan and the mayor's London plan, these issues of character are addressed, and therefore we need to enforce them locally while being aware of it. Just in certain areas we don't have actual powers to prevent it, but we can advocate. So I'm sorry, that's not so. Yes, very sympathetic. We can't stop things like that from happening, but we can go back and be advocates to see if we can get it put back or see what the plans are for it.
Can I come back?
Yeah.
Obviously, most powers come through national planning legislation, I assume. Is it possible for local authorities to introduce their own particular rules about certain things in the way that they have bylaws, for example, could a local authority decide that it wanted to keep, for example, or stop people paving over front gardens and retain hedges and trees?
Yes, so there are within limits, and now certainly paving over front gardens is something that the council has discouraged, and I know because I've gotten in conversations, some quite difficult conversations with local residents about it, and in fact, interestingly, at the moment, one of the things that is driving that is the conversion to electric vehicles. Where people want to pave over their front gardens in order to make sure that they've got access to an electric charging point. And of course, a way to try to prevent that is for the council doing what it is and trying to get out on-street electric charging points. And I think there are some other measures that that we potentially could take and look into. But what I can do is take that hedge example back to officers and say, within the whole process of setting the local plan and our local implementation of it, is there anything that we could do about protecting things like that? Yep.
I think that's important because hedges are the most important thing, it seems to me.
Yeah. And there are restrictions on trees, for example, that come into it, and we've got decisions on that. But we can take that back and see what we can do about are there any practical measures we can take on hedges?
I'd like to add to what Paul has said. Sorry. Now, I don't sit on planning these days. I think it must be 2 years since I last sat on planning. But at that time, I was quite impressed at the growing attention that was being paid to landscaping, if you like, around any development, ensuring trees weren't cut down and hedges. Now, what I could suggest, Andrew, is that if you are aware that somebody's put in a planning application to either extend, demolish or anything, to do any work on a property, send in your comments to the planning department and just say, I take it that whatever work's going to be carried out, it will be sympathetic to the area that we live in, i.e. keeping trees and bushes in their natural state as much as possible. You do have a voice, so you could try that.
Okay, Andy. Fine, thank you. Amy Ruby, are you here? No? I'll read out. We will be addressing Amy's question, I'm sure, later on, but she says, I speak on behalf of many people in Barnes in the Castelnau estate on Verdon Road. We are wondering, will the buses continue to run past here? As various people say they will, yet some disagree. Thank you. So, Afra, I think you've got a finger on the pulse of the 419.
So I'm sorry that Amy's not here. I think part of the lack of clarity is because TfL haven't told us what changes are likely to be going forwards, and we do need to wait for this review survey that they've done and to see what the changes will be. Having said that, because of where buses can turn and the turning circles that they have available, it does mean that a number of buses do have to go down Lonsdale Road, and I think that's part of the issue that Amy is having. So it is likely that some of these streets will still need to continue to be used for the buses to enable appropriate turning. Unfortunately, currently, there isn't sufficient space right by Hammersmith Bridge to allow buses to turn around. Now, it's something that we did raise with TfL and would have to be done in conjunction with the council of whether if the bridge is going to be closed for at least 3 years, whether they can look to make some kind of changes down at that end near Hammersmith Bridge that would enable some bus turning. But obviously that isn't something quick, easy or cheap, so it's not going to happen in the short term.
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to add to what Afra said. I have found the greatest concern has been for the 419 on the estate, serving everybody as a hail and ride service. And at the last community conversation meeting we had, which was in Mortlake, in the the Scout Hut 6 months ago, this issue was very high priority. And I did make a promise then. I said, if ever I learn that they're going to stop the 419 Hayland Ride, I'll be the first one out on the streets campaigning against that ruling. Now, I've been assured by so many people that the 419 is here to stay. I personally, when we met, Paul and Daphne, we met with TfL, I put forward the suggestion that had been brought to me by a spokesperson on behalf of lots of residents of Castelnau Estate, asking if the barrier, do you know what I mean by the barrier that blocks off Beaulieu Road from Lonsdale Road? Now that was brought in 5 years ago. I was part of the decision making because it was reported to the police that there was so much of rats running along there to beat Castelnau to get onto the bridge. So they brought in this barrier. But the suggestion was that as the bridge is going to be closed for, say, 3 years, and we're not in fear of a rat run now, there's hardly any traffic at times. The suggestion was that that barrier, all it has to do is be open, there's no expense, just take it, open it and lock it. And the suggestion was that the 419 could start at that point and cover some of Stillingfleet Road. Now I'm aware there's over 100 flats, single flats, 1-bedroom flats in Stillingfleet Road, all en masse in a block. A lot of older people live there, and they would find this a very convenient service. So I put forward the suggestion, believing this was good, and I was told it was going to be considered. Now I'm happy to go on pushing for this because I think it could help, and also ensuring that the 419 still goes around the estate. The idea being it goes up Lonsdale Road, turns left into Beaulieu Road for a little way, and then turns right and carries on its route that it does at the moment. But to my mind, that little extra would further guarantee the continuity of the 419. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Can I ask if Jeffrey Freeman is here? I shall read your question. I'm going to repeat the question, don't worry. Okay, so thank you, Jeffrey. Jeffrey's asked us to consider the following issue. He's lived in Barnes for some 6 years, a newcomer. I welcome the increase in bicycle use in the area, which he's noticed. I rejoiced in the thought of the internal combustion engine being made obsolete in the not too distant future. However, cyclists, like everyone, must be responsible, and that includes electric scooters. They are subject to hardly any regulations, and I'm alarmed by the increased recklessness. There will inevitably be accidents if nothing else is done. It is a simple and inexpensive procedure to solve this problem. I have already had more than one narrow escape. There is no point in trying to speak to the cyclists because, putting it politely, they obviously consider themselves to be above the law. I would like steps taken and put in place so that cyclists are aware of their responsibilities and make it less likely that an accident will occur. There are hotspots in the area, and they include the bridge, Barnes Primary School, Railway Side, and Barnes Pond. So that's your comment and question. I'd just like to add, I'm very concerned as well, as a resident, that the cyclists do seem to have taken the upper hand and ignoring the law. We have seen a terrible case in the papers recently where a woman stepped off in front of a cyclist on a road and the cyclist has to pay the damages and the legal fees. So, councillors, what's your take on this very tricky situation? Afra.
So I think we all sympathise, Jeffrey, with your situation. I'm sorry to hear that you were nearly knocked down. I mean, cyclists aren't above the law, as we've heard. Cycling on the pavement is illegal. So, and we certainly will enforce that where we can. But of course, unfortunately, cyclists, like any road users, can behave in a way that's inappropriate. But it's not considered a council matter to enforce it, but rather a police matter. So it's something that we can work together with local police to try and make sure that it is enforced. And we do have somebody from the community safety team at the council who might have some kind of thoughts and ideas about that. But just to say, it is illegal to cycle on the pavement. People do need to behave in an appropriate manner. I mean, we all share your view of wanting to encourage safe cycling and decrease air pollution, but we need to be careful about other road users, pedestrians and the like.
It's just a bit of personal experience. Today, I'm waiting in my car at the traffic lights, and this young woman on the cycle came on my left, so I was aware I'm turning left, I was watching her, but she went on through the lights. So when I caught up with her, I opened the window. What did I say? I didn't toot. I didn't want to shake her, frighten her, but I did shout out lights, and I got 2 fingers in the air. But as you say, Jeffrey, some, not all, but there's a certain minority of cyclists who do think they're above the law. But surely we need to have enforcement for it. We read from the council officer, it is illegal, he's confirmed that, but without someone to enforce it, they're not going to stop, they're not going to bother to listen, because they're aware that we're so short on police resources. But somehow, somewhere, we should think of an idea where we can rein some of these people in to behave in a civil manner. Thank you.
Was there another follow-up question?
Is there a follow-up comment?
I'm speaking as an ex-cyclist. I've cycled in London for 40 years until somebody with 2 earbuds on the phone knocked me off. And there are things that have to be done with cyclists, i.e. the cycle has to be registered, because then at least one has got some sort of recognition. Secondly, there's obviously having followed a school child on a bicycle, no helmet, mobile phone, one hand on the handlebars, wobbling along to school. Well, do the schools not educate children in this way? I mean, it's crazy in this country. You wouldn't get this in Switzerland. They'd all be registered and they'd be behaving.
Can I ask councillors, do we still have the Rosper cycling proficiency in our schools?
There are cycling proficiencies that
Because I go back a fair amount. When in my school, you were not allowed to cycle to school until you had passed your cycle proficiency test. So, can I ask?
I know that schools still do, particularly at primary level, do cycle proficiency. I don't think they ban cycling before they get to that point, but there is cycling proficiency.
Well, they take them all out in yellow vests and teach them how to walk and not cross the road dangerously. They teach them that, so why don't they do the bike?
Yeah. Well,
Charles, supplementary, I take it.
I usually agree with Stephen on everything, make it my business to do so. But on this occasion, I might sort of say a slightly counter point of view, which is that I think we're getting this sort of slightly out of proportion, given the threat that cyclists pose to pedestrians compared with A, the other way around, and B, cars and what cars do on the road. The cars have totally dominated our road system, and cyclists have to sort of fight their way through. And often I think the reason cyclists don't obey the law, and of course I always obey it and I totally advocate that, is that they don't feel, A, it's safe to do so sometimes. There's a lot of confusion on cycling on pavements. I saw at the weekend that I think in Kensington Borough they were advising teenagers up to the age of 16 to cycle on the pavements. The idea that children are going to junior school, children are going to do cycling proficiency, well, parents are petrified of allowing their children to cycle now at all. So I don't know what proportion of young children have bikes anymore, but it's a completely different time to when we
I agree, yes.
So when we were, I mean, I cycled to school every single day of my life. It's just not possible now. We're not building the infrastructure to enable that to happen. So I think the proportion, focusing on cyclists as if they're one breed or one species is slightly unhelpful. I think we should be doing everything we possibly can to focus on encouraging more and more people to cycle. One last point about helmets. The National Cycling Societies fight every attempt of a local authority or a private business or whatever it might be to force people to wear helmets, because there is no evidence that wearing helmets is overall safer than not wearing them, and indeed it actually discourages people from cycling, which is seen as an active form of transport, which is much healthier if more people do it. Okay, you can look at individual instances of everything, but actually overall there is no evidence that cycling with helmets is safer. And certainly in places like Copenhagen, in a place like Copenhagen, which leads the world in terms of cycling, they have no laws about having to wear helmets, and the primary advocate of cycling who's led the way in Copenhagen will not wear a helmet, and he won't allow his children or grandchildren to wear helmets because there's no evidence that it actually is safer.
Can I just thank you for that. My personal view is you should wear a helmet, but it's obviously up to individuals to make their own choices on that. I certainly wouldn't let my children go out of the house on a bike without a helmet. I think that this is obviously an issue that people are interested in, because we've had a number of supplementary questions. Personally, I would like to encourage and see more cycling. My husband and my son are regular cyclists. I am not, because I feel scared on the road. So I think it's an interesting conversation to have about why some people don't feel confident to go out, or others do feel confident to do so. But I think that Jeffrey's point wasn't that we should be specifically targeting cyclists, but more that we should be asking all road users, whether they are drivers or cyclists, to behave appropriately, to behave lawfully, and to be considerate of other people. And of course we would all support that and need to be part of supporting that, and education of our children is one element of it, but also having conversations like this that raise awareness, I think, are really important as well.
Are you suggesting there should be no regulation at all? Are you suggesting there should be no regulation at all, and that cyclists are free to do as they want, when they want? I don't see many cars on the pavements driving amongst residents.
No, I'm not. I agree that people should abide by the law, and I don't know how far you go with regulating with registering bikes or registering cyclists. I don't agree with that. I totally agree that people should abide by the law and cycle safely. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is William Kay from Devereux Lane. I walk along the towpath, and as long as I walk in a dead straight line, these people hurtle past me without any danger. But supposing I see a boat I want to have a look at, or a bird in a bush or something, and I take one step to the side, I could be knocked down at any time, and another £100,000 will have to be spent on lawyers. It's very bad on the towpath, and I just wish they had bells. When I was a cyclist, we all had little bells, and you rung the thing if you were approaching somebody. That would be a very simple thing to insist on that, much easier than all the registration business.
Thank you.
Bring back the bell.
Can I just add and make a comment to that, then maybe we can move on. And sorry, I have to declare an interest first. One, I'm a cyclist, and two, my day job is trying to promote and provide service for micro-electric vehicles, which is sort of e-cargo bikes and these e-scooters you're talking about for when they're allowed. So I'm a great advocate of trying to get people onto these smaller vehicles, but just your point in particular, and I agree very much. I think we're all in agreement of we want to encourage more cyclists and more people onto these more efficient vehicles. And just like, whether you're riding a cycle or you're in a car, it's the ones who are not behaving well who make the rest look bad. And I've had conversations where I've stopped other cyclists and said, you're the one who makes us all look bad, gives us the bad name and doesn't. But this issue, because I've talked about this in other areas, is very much like an issue that Rita and I were dealing with a few years ago, which is bizarrely dog mess, which is that, we say that we need more enforcement, but the problem is realistically, you're just not going to have people there spotting them every time in order to enforcement. So it is very much like Afra says, one of education and one just of sort of cultural acceptance. And part of that is the council and others just keeping up the message that it's not acceptable behavior to be riding on the pavements when they shouldn't in an irresponsible manner, and to be giving other citizens who are there, so almost the ammunition to say you shouldn't be doing that, because if it's not talked about, then people just say, well, nobody cares, and they'll keep on doing it. Now, one of the things that we tried, that I'm going to try to keep getting the council to do, for whatever reason, they didn't do it at the end of our term in 2018. But one of the measures we took with the dog mess was to get, where you had a problem, is to get stencils down, and you would put a sign on the pavement that would wash away with rain over time, but would indicate, say, no dog mess. And it just everybody can see it, and it raises that awareness. And if there are hot spots with cycling on pavements, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to do the same thing. So there's not a silver bullet to it, but it's that measure of just keeping up for those small number of cyclists that we want to continue. We want more people to be doing it, but to make sure we get better behaviour out of them. And I think we can do it.
Okay. Railway sign a lot.
Yeah.
And there is a sign on there, no sign.
Yeah.
It's like a cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going
In those ones, that's right. A lot of people just don't pay attention. Yeah, sure.
I'm going to
It's going to be a little bit of enforcement.
Sorry. I'm going to take one more question or supplementary from this lady here. Hold on, wait for your microphone.
Several points. After a slight discussion with a cyclist, I went to the highway code. There is virtually nothing in the highway code about cyclists, so you have no comeback to them. If we're not going to register bicycles, and if we're not going to teach them in schools how to be responsible cyclists, then we'll go on having chaos. Because at the moment they're absolute outlaws. They're very fit, they've got very expensive bicycles, and they shoot. Well, we all know what they do. But there's nothing in the highway code, there's no law.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think our council, our team here, are going to be able to influence the highway code in the short term. I think it's for us as responsible citizens to educate our children and our grandchildren into how to become responsible citizens, and cycling on pavements and in general falls under that. Rita, I'm going to let you have one more comment, and then we'll change the subject.
It's to highlight the issue of cycling on pavements, which can be so dangerous. Now, William has just made a comment about cyclists whooshing past him, could knock him over. We both live on the same estate, and when you come up to Castelnau, the main thoroughfare, through Trinity Church Road, that's the junctions, most of you will know. It's not so bad at the moment because there's less traffic. But up until the bridge closed, it's a real danger spot. Walking up Trinity Church Road, just as you turn the corner, then to perhaps go over the crossing, somebody would come through the lights there. or they would come up on the pavement, rather, to avoid the red light. And the times, I've nearly been knocked over, and it really, if I was a little frail person, I would have been knocked to the ground and seriously injured. They come at such a speed, they're beating the red light, and they're coming across your path, they can't see you coming round the corner. So some of the cycling can be very dangerous indeed.
Thank you, Rita. Okay, I'm going to move on now. Charles Campion has been very helpful to the BCA and to our community in general, and is the founder of the Barnes Ponder and other initiatives. Charles, would you like to read out your question?
Okay, thank you. The question is, I've got two questions.
Yes, you can. Do you want to do them both together, or would you?
I'd rather let me do one.
Different subjects.
I'll do the school one first.
Okay.
It's kind of a little bit related to what we've been talking about. Has the council considered banning the school run, which serves various schools, particularly along Lonsdale Road where I live, and can't use the Lonsdale Road up to Hammersmith because of the level of traffic and on the buses adds half an hour or so to the journey in the morning rush hour. Have they considered banning the school run in particular as part of the planning conditions for the new school, the new high school at Mortlake Brewery, which again, is served by Mortlake Station and the bus routes. The idea that we're going to have more cars coming for a school run, which is totally unnecessary with children of that age group, seems to me, totally unnecessary. And I'd like to. I know you're not the council; you're council members for the board, but interested to hear your views.
Afra, you can take the first part. Please.
Well, with specific reference to the Mortlake Brewery site, it is a secondary school, so one would anticipate that there will be fewer school-run car journeys. I know with younger primary school children, they're more likely to be taken to school, obviously, by a parent or a guardian. I know from experience with my secondary school children, they would not be seen dead with me coming anywhere near them in the school, which means that they either take the bus or cycle into school. So I think from that perspective, the fact that it's a secondary school hopefully will minimise to some extent. I don't think that there is a plan for completely banning the school run around the Mortlake Brewery site, but if others have further information, then please do chip in. What we have been told by officers is that any school has to have a school travel plan and talk about how they intend to encourage people to use public transport and other means of getting in. So there will be a conversation they have to have, and they need to explain what their plans are for doing that. I agree with you in that I would love people to walk in more, to cycle in more, to get the bus in more, and I think it's something that is behaviour change that will happen over time. Interestingly, and I'm sure we'll come onto this about the bridge in your other question, I live on Madrid Road, and the closure of Hammersmith Bridge actually means that my son feels, or I feel happier with him cycling in. So in fact, limiting the cars has increased our confidence in him being on the road, not on the pavement. So there are some interesting kind of, behavioural changes that can happen. But I think we'd like to see something that happened, in combination with the community rather than being forced onto people.
Sorry, Charles, I'd like to add something to what Afra said. When we were talking to TfL, I mentioned that I am a governor at Lowther School. And I said, should there be a secondary school built there? I hope we're going to keep the 419 bus, because this would be wonderful for cutting back on cars, parents taking their children to the school, because a lot of people on this estate, their children go to Lowther, and then the parents could feel happy that their children were on a bus going directly to the school. But I was assured by the TfL manager that if there was a demand for that service, there would be a school bus put in place. And I think that's wonderful because that could cut out probably 20 cars.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just to add, Charlie, part of the problem is how do you define the school run, and therefore how do you enforce it, and where do they stop and they start? So I think it's a very difficult thing to enforce. And I was okay, but let me come just. So I was in charge of schools in Richmond for 7 years. So the transport was a very big issue. And I think Afra is absolutely right in terms of it being a secondary school rather than a primary school. There are lots of issues connected to it. If it's a very well-run school, as I expect it to be, then it will be very popular locally, and you'll have people coming locally. And what's the need to take your teenager, drive your teenager to school, and especially who wants to get locked in traffic to drive your teenager to school where they could be cycling? So I think there will be some self-enforcement, and we need to work with the school in order to encourage both parents, but as we talked about earlier, teachers, as much as possible to be taking public transport there, and that's the way to deal with it.
Yes, Charles.
Just I obviously focused on Mortlake, the new school there, but there's also the issue of the existing schools and St Paul's. I see the cars driving into the school, round, back, dropping off, back out, coming out, and it's literally, renders that road unusable for local residents. That's a very serious thing for a school to do. And now that the bridge is open to pedestrians and cyclists and closed to vehicles, I see children walking across the bridge, cycling across the bridge. They are capable of doing it. I take the point about younger children, but banning school runs can actually include having an exclusion area around the school, because a lot of work recently has shown that the air quality around schools is really, really poor. So as well as taking our children to school, we're actually poisoning them in the process.
Yeah, and there certainly are measures being discussed and have been taken elsewhere to ban the parking and close off traffic right around schools. But what you can still get then is people coming up and parking close to it. So it doesn't stop the school run necessarily, but it'll deal with potentially idling close to the school, and certainly those are things that can continue to be worked on. Yeah.
Question or comment from
There is a very good cycle lane along the 316 which could easily be extended to the new school and beyond. I mean, if we want children to cycle to school, then we must put in the safe route for them. Yeah. I used to ride to the council along the 316, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just make a couple of really quick comments?
You may.
Just with respect to Nikki's comment about cycling, there are plans to a consultation along Lonsdale Road about putting in some double yellow lines at some points, and that actually might make cycling a bit easier, because at the moment you have to come out into the road where cars are parked, and that would address the issues that you're talking about with St Paul's School. My only comment is that I think that the power of your children or people's children to persuade their parents is almost the biggest element. I have to confess, all three of my children are at schools on Lonsdale Road, but we live quite close by. But I know, for example, one of the things they do at Herodian School is in the junior part of the school is they try to encourage people to walk to school by you get a sticker, a tick every time you walk to school. It's a competition to see which class can have more kids walking to school, and that really does encourage the kids to do it. So I think ideas that can hopefully make the children lead the change are often some of the most effective ones. And every time that we're speaking with the schools, we can continue to kind of encourage and promote those sorts of things.
Thank you. Right, Charles, you have your second question or comment for us, please.
Yeah. This was about the bridge. I think a lot of the language has you know, I was a bit disappointed when it first closed that there seemed to be a reaction, knee-jerk reaction was to throw blame around instead of actually straight away thinking, okay, what can we do about this? And I think, you know, a lot of the things we've talked about already are about how do we manage change? How do we manage change in the way we get about? You know, how do we manage change in our community? And my question is about the shaping of vision for the bridge. I mean, we know that Councillor Hodgins has said it's likely to be closed for up to 3 years, maybe at least 3 years, and it may never open again to cars as an option. And so isn't it time that we started to think about a vision, not just for the bridge, in terms of its interim use, you know, because it's going to be shut. I know they've got to do engineering works and things, but currently it's a complete wreck. It's like a disaster area. It's meant to be listed, and it looks like a complete shambles. Can't we start to think about how we might use it? Maybe a summer festival, or, you know, green it or something. You know, start having a bit of a creative vision for it. But also in terms of the longer term, you know, we should plan for getting about in a different way. The buses obviously have been completely messed up by TfL. People just want to get to the bridge and walk across. That's what everyone was expecting, or cycle across as I do. I think there's a huge amount that we could do as a community. We showed it in the Ponder. You know, we're a very, very active and proactive and imaginative community. And I think rather than people telling us what they're going to do, I think we should get involved in helping to shape that future vision and think about how we move around. And there's a lot of infrastructure, community infrastructure that goes from the north, the south from the St Mary's Hospital, Roehampton University. These buses are very busy with students, etc., patients coming down. The schools along Lonsdale Road, which we talked about, Mortlake, crossing the bridge, Hammersmith, then on to the new Crossrail, the new HS2 at Park Royal, etc. There's this kind of very strong route potentially in the future. And we may never have buses over the bridge. We may never have cars over the bridge again. It wasn't designed for that. You could have a tram or a lightweight electric transit system somehow. I think we should really start to think about how we move around sustainably and how we get across the bridge as part of that. Anyway, just again, the question was written thinking that it was to the council. I know that, you know, the council's now Liberal Dem run, but your views are looked for.
There are a few ways to feedback at the moment practically. There, of course, through local councillors. There's a little bit of a time pressure with what I laid out at the start, and there isn't that process that you talked about. You may or may not know, I made an offer to take over control of the bridge and its resources for exactly those reasons, because I think it impacts us more than it impacts residents north of the river. And I would much rather have been in control of that process and to develop the thinking. But given where we are, just in the short term, obviously all the representatives, whether it would be the three of us, Zach Goldsmith and the council, are in various ways talking to TfL, the government, and Hammersmith and Fulham. We're feeding back directly. The council has a survey on its website, which they're asking people to fill out just to inform them in their discussions. And as well, I think we can feed those back through Zach Goldsmith as well in order to talk. So I think it's three-pronged, not quite as coordinated in the short term as you were looking for. But once we do see the proposals for the plans from TfL, which is effectively imminent, then I think we should be going back to them. And there's been a lot of ideas fed back in those meetings that I referred to earlier about what could be done in the short term, whether it's a Bailey Bridge to try to keep the traffic flowing, or some others. I know that there are some people who would like to see it remain open, as you say, to pedestrians and cyclists and smaller vehicles, and not to cars. And unfortunately, we'd have to think about buses, because the buses are the ones that are really the issue about the strength of the bridge going forward. But I would say I'm not in favor of not having it reopened to cars. And given what I said earlier about advocating people into smaller vehicles, mainly because I've been spending a lot of time in Isheen and other places. In fact, they are the ones, if you see it there, that are really facing the brunt of the problem with the traffic, because it just gets so locked up in those areas because people are finding different ways. And I think what we need to do, which I advocated, going into the last election, which still think needs to be done, is really to look at a strategic area-wide transport plan. To give you an example, the biggest issue that clogs up the traffic on the Upper Richmond Road are people going west. Everybody's trying to get out to either the A316 or the M3 or up to the M4. And they're stopped at that junction going to Clifford Avenue, and it gets stopped up going quite far back, and everything just locks up. And we need to take a much more strategic view of the whole area, of both encouraging people onto different types of vehicles, but also looking at what are the different trade-offs we make in terms of the flow, which just doesn't work at the moment, and nobody's taking a look at that. So I think once TfL does come back with it, we can deal with the bridge itself. But we do, as a council, and working with TfL and working together with Wandsworth and working together with Hammersmith and Fulham and Hounslow, need to take a much more strategic view area-wide. Otherwise, just these bit solutions are not going to get us there. And because we're not in control of that whole process, we have to be advocates. But certainly, as your local councillors, we can be advocates working with you, Charles, and the BCA and others in trying to push those things forward.
Okay. Charles, supplementary.
Absolutely. We have to look at the wider area.
Yep.
And I think if we're going to encourage what they call modal shift, it would be perfectly feasible to have one bridge, and as I say, it may not ever open again to vehicles. You don't know if it will, and I wonder whether there's a legality point as well about the safety and the width of the bridge crossing, and the air quality issue as well. But actually, the width is the conflict, etc. But if you had a sort of networked solution where many more people had a very high quality public transport connection effectively, which then took up much more of the people travelling in that way rather than cars. We talk about it, we pay lip service to it, but to me this is a real opportunity to actually plan for something genuinely that starts to get people out of their cars.
Okay, it's a longer conversation, absolutely, and there does need to be coordination. The owner of that is, and that's just to say how the owner of that strategic across boroughs is TfL. But of course, we as councillors and as the council need to be engaging TfL to be saying very strongly that's what we want, and we want to be working with them on that area wide. Because they're not doing it, and very frustratingly, TfL works very much in silos. You've got the team that looks after the buses, and then you've got the team that looks after the roads. And I haven't seen, to my satisfaction, enough overall strategic planning across different modes, and to be thinking, essentially, if we were to design it all again, what would we do? That's the approach that it needs.
Thank you, Paul. All right, Charles. Yep. Okay, so we now come to the part where it's your turn to ask my colleagues questions. So I'll ask if you'll give your name as well when we pass you the microphone, and we'll see what we can do. Is there someone who hasn't asked a question? Unity and short.
Thank you. Unity Harvey, and I would like to come in on this strategic traffic plan. I've put forward 2 ideas for bus routes to TfL, and I would really like the councillors to take them up for the future, even when the bridge is working again.
Okay.
Because although I brought them as a mitigating factor, I think it would really enhance the area and do a lot to alleviate traffic, cars, and help cyclists and therefore pedestrians and even school trips. For simplicity's sake, we can call them hospital buses because it's easier to explain the route that way. The shortest one, I can do quickly, is because most of the bus routes I want to leave the same, but the 72 I would like to leave as it was from Hammersmith, but not only go to Roehampton Hospital, but to go up to Asda and along to Kingston Hospital, because that will be short, and most people do it with one bus change. And if I've put that into TfL journey planners, and all the other ways to go there are through Richmond with about 3 changes and takes ages. So that's a simple change. But the one that would make the most difference is if we could have a frequent two-way bus route from Richmond along the lower Richmond Road to Sainsbury's, to Chalkers Corner, past where the new school is going, because that could pick up Q school children, past the Straight Brewery, through Barnes High Street, to the Red Lion on Church Road when people could get to church, and the Wetland Centre and the sports centres, down Rocks Lane to the Common. We can't take a shortcut there because there's no bus stop in the middle of the Common. So from Rocks Lane to Putney Hospital and to Putney Bridge, over the bridge, and I'm calling it a hospital route again, because with one bus change you can get to Charing Cross and on to Hammersmith Hospital without walking over the bridge. But also you can reach Brompton, Chelsea and Westminster and the Marsden. Not only that, once you get to the other side of Putney Bridge, I would really like it to go to Sloane Square. The 22 bus, which everybody says is too long anyway, could stop at Sloane Square, and we could even take their slot off the route on the bridge, so they couldn't say there's not room on the bridge. If we went to Sloane Square, we would link up all those hospitals, but we'd link up all those bus routes. It's ever so difficult to get to Wimbledon, places like that from here. If we had that one bus route from Richmond to Sloane Square on the route I suggest, we could reach all those routes around Wimbledon and that way. We could also take traffic. The local traffic would use that because it's quicker, and we'd take traffic off the upper Richmond Road. And lastly, we were talking about school runs from Lowther and people. We could put our children on a bus easily to that to get to the new school. I can't even get to the Stag Brewery site to a meeting without changing 2 or 3 times from the Red Line. I certainly can't get to Richmond. I've either got to go north. If I want to get anywhere from here, I've got to do 3 sides of the square where this bus would make it 1. So what I'm requesting is not that you pursue this with Transport for London, because it's a golden opportunity and mitigation to get those 2 hospital routes that describes them well.
Thank you very much.
And also to follow it up afterwards.
Great.
Please could you follow it up afterwards as well? That's my question.
Thank you. You're happy to reply?
Do you want a response? You want a response?
Alfred's going to sort it. That was her answer.
Well, I would just like, from a personal, selfish perspective, I would love a bus direct to Kingston, so I'm 100% with you on that. And also because parking in Kingston Hospital can be extremely challenging, so it would be very valuable. I think Rita already mentioned this, but when the secondary school eventually does open the Stag Brewery site, TfL has said that they will look at bus options. So I want to reassure you that the challenges you're having now should be addressed when the site is up and running. Interestingly, Richmond Borough is one of only 2 boroughs in London which is seeing its bus usage increasing. So we are bus users here, and we definitely should ensure that we're not overlooked, because it's so important to us currently, and also clearly the trend is that we want to and are increasing our bus usage. But I think it comes back to the point that Charles was making previously and that Paul made, which is if we try to look at single routes in isolation, it's not always, we don't always end up with the best outcome. So when TfL came for the 22 bus meeting, which was, I think, several years ago now, they did promise us that they would look at Barnes as a whole. And I know that all three of us will continue to put on the pressure that it doesn't work to just look at one bus route. We need to understand how the whole system is linking together. And I think some of these suggestions you've made sound very sensible, but in isolation, it's hard to judge because you need to see what else is happening. And obviously, there's a lot of changes going on right now. So we will definitely bear your suggestions in mind, throw them into the mix, and keep putting on the pressure for TfL to understand that we want more buses and we want to encourage them to go in lots of different directions, linking up hospitals, linking us into central London, etc.
Thank you. Rita, did you want to say something? No? Right. Wait for your microphone, please.
Yes, I'm Fiona Dare. I've been looking at this message about no idling, and I don't know if there's anybody who's an expert on how many emissions are produced by idling and that sort of thing. So I have a hybrid car, and I'd like to know how clean it is when idling. I think it recharges my car. The other thing is that when motorbikes roar past and fast drivers, how much in the way of emissions are they causing? Even not idling, but they're really roaring away. That's it, really.
Thank you, Fiona. I don't think we've got anyone.
I don't think we've got the. Sorry, we don't have the numbers off the top of our head, but we could check. We can try and get you some numbers on that.
I thought hybrid turned off the engine.
Well, it recharges. It recharges.
I thought the low, say, 5 miles an hour on a hybrid round with electricity.
Yes, but when it's stationary, it recharges mostly, and then it kicks in later.
I think you'll find that when it's got sufficient charge, and you're stuck at traffic lights or a level crossing, it cuts out completely.
Yes.
It only cuts in when it thinks to itself, oh, I haven't got enough to start the car, I'll go into idle mode. But hybrids do regulate their own idling, so I wouldn't worry about it if they cut in.
Can I just ask about ice cream vans? That's quite a big issue, and I noticed the one by Barnes Pond had its engine running all the time. Is that covered by the idling? Is it covered by the rule?
No, it's not, unfortunately. We at the BCA, we have tried to talk to the ice cream vans, especially on Barnes Fair Day, and we have several of them running. We have Nikki. Charlotte has spoken to them about idling all the time, and they now do switch off for periods until they get to the point where they have to recharge their freezers. So we are aware of it, Charles, but there's nothing we can really do about it.
Stephen, can I just comment? I think there is something we could do. The power of the people. Charles, next time you see you're in close vicinity to an ice cream van, just in a polite way go and say, are you aware of pollution problems? Do you think you could switch off your engine? I've gone up to several motorists and asked them. You might get a rude response, but I would have thought a commercial ice cream seller would be a bit more respectful. But it is the power of the people. If we all say to people, look, you know, you should turn your engine off, or do you realise you're creating pollution around here? I'm sure you'll make an impression on some people.
Okay, lady in the front here has a question for us. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
I'm going to be very rude to people who are not here.
Well, that's okay then.
Because I'm afraid I live south of the bridge, and I think this bridge is an absolute disaster, which I don't get the feeling is being addressed seriously enough, because it is messing up the whole of West London, over Putney Bridge, Chiswick Bridge, all the side roads. All these areas are also suffering from this. Why isn't the Mayor of London brought into this? why isn't there much more pressure? I mean, it should never have happened. We know Hammersmith and Fulham can't manage it, so they shouldn't have it. But I mean, there's no sense of urgency. They must know every nut and bolt of that bridge, and it's going to take 3 years to do. Well, as I say, somebody said to me, bring the army in and get the army in to do it as an emergency roadway or something like that. But that is absolutely appalling. And then TfL, I didn't quite hear all you said, I'm sorry, but TfL, I mean, to pretend that 2 buses an hour is a bus service for the... And we just sit back and let this happen. I don't understand why it's not all treated as high emergency.
Oh, you're quite...
I can say, and then if anybody else wants to comment, I mean, Charles mentioned the initial reaction after the bridge closed was a lot of blame went around, and that's true, partly because there was a lot of blame to go around. And anyway, people need to get it out. And without going over the whole history, you're absolutely right. But I do think that it is recognised now, and it is a priority. And Transport for London is treating it in the way that they do, which is not moving as quickly as you'd like to, but it certainly is an absolute priority to them now. So there are real plans being put in place to address it. Sort of without going into it here, what's happened in the past has happened, and I've been very critical. I think we all have been very critical of Hammersmith and Fulham Council, and it has been known. But I think the priority is there at the moment to get it fixed, different from what it was before. Now there are bus routes. There's a lot of pressure on the bus routes which aren't working. And we need to continue to do that, and we'd like TfL to move faster on that as well. But I don't think it's an issue at the moment of it not being a priority. We just need to get plans in place and to start moving on it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that to reassure you, without laying blame anywhere, that previously the project for repairing the bridge was being left to Hammersmith and Fulham Council, but it has now been moved over, and TfL are project managing the repairs. And so, whilst that has been slow to this point, I think now that TfL have come in and taken over project managing it, it does mean that progress is happening. As I understand it, although it's frustrating because to those of us who are walking over the bridge on a regular basis, it feels that nothing is happening, and that's because they have to go through a design phase of the work, which I'm sure we will both feel the same, that should have happened several years ago, but for whatever reason it hasn't. But that is now happening, and once they've come up with their option appraisal and can begin putting out tenders for the work, we're hoping that we'll start to see action. And I would just agree with Paul that everybody is taking it very seriously, and we will continue to put pressure on them because we would like to see it sorted as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Anybody else got a question?
Did you get my question I sent in a week ago?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I think I've read out all the questions that were listed. Would you like to ask a question, sir?
Yes, I'll try. Even make it a little bit shorter than it was on the original. What I'm about, in the end, turns out to be this idling business. Now, when I came here this evening, I sat in my car idling and idling and idling for a couple of minutes, and while I was there, I could see just up the road, at the corner of Lonsdale and Castelnau, there was a bus and 2 other cars idling away for 2 minutes. All because traffic lights, which are totally redundant and unnecessary. Were this whole thing going to be over in 3 weeks, I wouldn't fuss, but if we're here for several years, those traffic lights can be removed. There is no opposing traffic. A couple of white lines. How do people ever get out of Riverview Gardens? How do people ever get out of Washington Road, for instance? They don't have traffic lights. Why do we need traffic lights? There is no traffic, just a few handful of people. So let's get them rephased. When I was at Scotland Yard, we could rephase traffic lights within 10 minutes.
You have to go through the consultation process.
I
I totally agree with you, and the pace is very frustrating. But I just want to let you know that we have directly raised the need for the traffic lights to be rephased, and so it is not.
They did say they would.
And they did say they would. So I don't want you to think that we haven't considered this,
explored it,
or raised it, but we will go back and push it again, because I agree. To me, it seems something quite quick and simple. I just wanted to mention the bus idling, which I know you were talking about the traffic lights, but I did also raise with TfL buses idling whilst they're just, having their break, I don't know, between dome routes, and made them aware that they could now face a fine if caught idling. The TfL representatives said that they do tell all the bus drivers not to idle, that they will go back and remind them not to, and he said no doubt once one of them gets a fine, it'll get around quite quickly and they'll stop doing it. So hopefully that's going to happen quite soon.
Charles.
Just on that TfL and phasing of traffic lights, they put, on TfL and phasing of traffic lights, they put in 2 new Pelican crossings in Barnes High Street a couple of years or so ago, at the cost of about £50,000 per crossing, and changed the phasing for pedestrians crossing. Before you pressed it, immediately it went to green and pedestrians crossed. Now, there's always a delay, not always, but most of the time there's quite a delay. What happens is people just cross anyway, which is probably not what's meant to happen, and then they go red and the cars stop and there's no one there. And this is just a ludicrous situation which has been going on. I've drawn it to attention, but I don't know if I could just mention it again, and maybe you could go back to when you were talking to me about buses and things like that. But I know nothing's going to happen because they don't listen.
Well, don't give up. Perseverance pays. That's what I've learned doing this job. Never give up. We will definitely go back to them on it. Some things, the pace of change seems to be slower than others, but it doesn't mean that we should.
We live in a time of austerity, but there seems to be endless funds for putting in new pedestrian traffic lights that no one particularly asked for. I don't know why.
I'm sure it can't cost that much to rephase the traffic lights, so I don't think we can blame austerity for that.
I have another question, if that's okay, about businesses.
Yes.
In the High Street, and I saw something about North Barnes. As a sound person on Saturdays, I've been doing pedestrian counts in Barnes High Street since before Marks and Spencer's opened, and the footfall has more than doubled on Saturdays, certainly at the time when I'm counting, which I understand is sort of, and it's so consistent now, and it's still, even after the bridge, it's still at the same level that it has been for a year and a half or so, which is more than double before Marks and Spencer's opened. So that's a great thing, and I think that is there any sort of monitoring of that? I know there's talk of North Barnes suffering a little bit, but equally, I talked to Jerry, for example, the jeweller on the High Street, who's saying that he doesn't think businesses suffer, and obviously, if people can't come from Hammersmith Bridge and across from Hammersmith, then equally there's more incentive for people to shop locally. So a question about the business, but also a question about how do we promote people shopping local, basically, and using local business.
So I can tell you, Charles, that both Emma and who's our town centre manager, and Raphael, who's the environment chairman, they have both started monitoring the shops in the High Street and in Castelnau Parade. And Emma held a meeting last week of the retailers, and on Friday the retailers are meeting at Olympic to discuss how to get round the closure of the bridge, what steps they are prepared to take, not the BCA or the rest of the community, but what they're doing to help themselves, which has been lacking. As you know, the BCA for several years tried to get the retailers together and to work together, and they haven't risen to the challenge. But the bridge closing has forced them to come together and to talk to each other and work out how they're going to do it. Anecdotally, they are not really suffering at the moment. Those in Castelnau Parade have said their cross-bridge traffic, of course, has has died, and deliveries to people who live on the north side of the bridge are not easy. But they're now looking at bikes, these cargo bikes. So whilst it's not the ideal situation, it is being looked at, it is being monitored, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that the community survives.
I just...
Yeah.
I was talking to a trader in Church Road this morning. I've talked to him several times recently. The situation for him is becoming quite dire. But I know, as Stephen said, I think he went to a meeting at the Olympic Studios this morning on traders. They are getting together and helping each other. I'm going to be in Church Road on Friday morning with Zach Goldsmith. But this will be to deal with another issue. But at the same time, I'm taking him to see the trader I've just mentioned, and I'm going to see if Zach's got the time just to listen to him and use him as representative of all the other traders, how they feel about the impact of the bridge. Could I just mention too another impact of the bridge that I'm dealing with? I started to get complaints from residents about the overflowing bins along Castelnau Parade, and that's obviously because of the increase in the footfall, people going over the bridge now. If you're coming from Hammersmith over the bridge, you can see right down Castelnau if you're going to get a bus. So if you can't see your bus, the psychology is that you take your time and you pop into a corner shop. That's why the corner shops are doing well. You go and buy a drink, paper, cigarettes, sweets, but then they've got nowhere to put that rubbish because the bins are overflowing. So I have put in a request. I'm really on the backs of the council to get an extra bin on each side of Castelnau because of the and I've tried for years to do this, because I've said at the weekend, the Castelnau Parade, the bins from Friday to Sunday, I've never been enough to take the overflow with visitors, especially at this time of the year. So I'm hoping I will be able to resolve that one. But there's so many areas of impact from the closure of the bridge. It's not just the buses.
Right, Unity.
My proposed bus route, if it goes to Sloane Square to Liz Hospital, could bring in people to Barn. Sorry, my proposed bus route, if it goes to Sloane Square, could bring in people who live there over to Barnes to our shops.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any more questions? Charles. Yes, all right.
It's a different subject. I just want to congratulate the BCA and the Friends of Barnes Common on the management of the common and the area around the pond, etc. One of the things I've noticed, which has brought absolute delight and is a national trend, it's a shame it's a trend, but hopefully it'll become a mainstream thing, is the planting of and allowing grass to grow and have a meadow cutting regime, as I think it's called, and you see the wildflowers coming up, etc. And I'd like to, and often people have complained about that because they see that they think it's the council not cutting the grass, but I think now people have realised that actually it's a very good thing, it looks beautiful and encourages wildlife, etc. And I'd like to see that much more expanded across the borough generally, in Barnes, I mean on the Castelnau Parade and up by Church Road. You know, the grass is cut within an inch of its life, and you could just imagine if that was allowed to grow, how beautiful it would be. So I just wanted to encourage much more meadow cutting, and my landscape architect friends tell me it's a much cheaper option as well in terms of the cost of managing grass.
I've got one more issue I'd like to bring up very briefly.
Very brief.
Just very briefly. I'm working on a campaign which Stephen, our chairman, started actually, a campaign for a cleaner Barnes. And at the moment, the big issue is fly tipping on the Castelnau estate. Every other day I'm reporting it. A lot of it now is garden waste. Just chucked, thrown in between two cars in Lonsdale Road last week. But anyway, I have been negotiating with council officers to get some really forceful looking posters, and hopefully they're going to go up in the next few days. But why I'm mentioning this to you is, if anybody sees anybody at any time, you don't have to confront them, but do let the council know. If you do see anyone, you might recognise them, but mostly the fly tipping is done at night. But it is a serious problem now.
Okay. Right, so I think unless we have any, what I'd like to do is ask the councillors now if they'd like to talk about the budgets.
Oh yes, just very quickly, there's some information at the back. As some of you, or all of you, will know, there are various funding streams from the council for local projects, things like Civic Pride and the Community Fund. The council is consolidating these into what they're calling ward-based budgets. So they will come out with some more detail on this soon, and there's information at the back. But the important part of that is, and including the amounts, which may vary from year to year, depending on the funding sources, some of which includes development and what's called the community infrastructure levy that comes along with that. But it gives the opportunity for local people to be thinking about projects of where we can direct this funding. So it's something for us all to be thinking about at the moment, and be working with three of us on Barnes-based projects. And more details will come out, and as I say, there's information at the back. But I know Charles probably has a lot of very good suggestions on that, which is great. And it's an opportunity for us to be doing more. Yeah.
There's a thing called New Homes Bonus.
Yeah.
New Homes Bonus, which was introduced a number of years ago, and I'm sure the more they grow, I assume there'll be 700 or something. So what happens? Does that money go straight into the community infrastructure levy, or I mean, a proportion of it is meant to be spent locally?
The proportion does come back to us, or comes back to the different wards across Richmond. It doesn't necessarily all come into Barnes, which is a bit of a shame, but we get a fair slice of it. Whilst we're talking about grants, I don't know whether this really applies to tonight's meeting, but can I remind people that on the 22nd of September is the car-free day across London, and our council has said if you want to turn your street into a play street, you should register right up until the end of August, and there is a grant of £250 per street to enable you to close it and provide games and a party atmosphere. So that's the car-free day, 22nd of September, turn your street into a play street. Right, any more questions? No? Charles?
You should definitely do that with Lonsdale Road, Charles.
Yes.
I was going to move to the High Street, actually.
Yeah.
Fiona Bruce is going on holiday, and I was wondering, Stephen, if you'd like to step in for her. She's done an amazing job.
Yeah.
You have a lovely manner.
Thank you very much, Charles. That's very kind of you. Ladies and gentlemen, oh, hold on 1 second. I think my new best friend over here.
Sorry, back on the same old topic. Could you explain monosyllabically how much influence Richmond Council has to resolve this bridge problem? Because it really is a nightmare for those of us who are here. What influence? I mean, I'm interested that TfL now seems to have been given charge of the bridge. Is the money available? And how can Richmond Council push to get some action?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough influence, which is why I wanted to Richmond to take over control of the bridge. But at the moment, unfortunately, we are all voices and advocates with no direct say or control over it. Is the honest answer. So we just have to keep pushing, and as Afra said, being very persistent, both constructively but also holding them to account, in particular TfL and Hammersmith and Fulham, and just be continuing to push. But we have the council in Richmond has no direct say over it.
Mention Wandsworth, Manchester, are all pushing.
Well, and that's right. And we all, and together, Wandsworth, which has Putney Bridge, and Hounslow with Chiswick Bridge, which is also suffering. We have a number of boroughs around that are being affected by it, and we are all pushing and advocating in that same way.
And you don't think the Mayor of London should be involved?
The Mayor of London, the Mayor of London is involved because the Mayor of London controls Transport for London. So Transport for London ultimately is answerable to the Mayor. And the Mayor has been challenged and had to answer a number of questions, including from our local GLA member, Tony Arbor, on the resources he's got, what the plans are, how much of a priority he's making it. And I would say at the moment, he's not giving much away in terms of saying that he's making it an absolute priority, and he's pointing back at Hammersmith and Fulham. So it is a little bit like that, although it is Transport for London is answerable to the Mayor. So the Mayor absolutely is involved, and money will have to come out of Transport for London, i.e. the Mayor's budget for it.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to this community conversation. Thank you to 3 ward councillors for their attendance tonight and answering your questions.
And thank you, Stephen. We've heard you've done a tremendous job.
Thank you. And we'll see you at the next one.